Virgo, there is someone who has been fighting a battle inside themselves for much longer than you realize. And the most frustrating part is that they may have been fighting against something they already knew was true. They knew they missed you. They knew they thought about you. They knew your absence affected them. They knew that life felt different without you. But admitting it, that was another story entirely. Because this person is stubborn, extremely stubborn. The type of person who would rather suffer silently than admit that they care. The type of person who could be thinking about you every single day and still refuse to send a message. The type of person who could miss your voice, your presence, your energy, your attention, and still tell themselves, I am fine. They may have convinced themselves that they could move on. They may have told themselves that they did not need you. They may have tried to replace the connection. They may have tried to distract themselves. They may have surrounded themselves with other people. They may have acted as though your absence meant nothing. But Virgo, there is a difference between pretending you do not need someone and actually being unaffected by their absence. And this person may have discovered that difference the hard way. Because at first, they may have believed that you were replaceable. They may have believed that someone else could give them the same attention, the same conversations, the same emotional connection, the same understanding, the same feeling of being seen. But perhaps they have slowly realized that they were wrong. You are not easily replaced. And the more they try to move on from you, the more they may begin to understand what they actually lost. This is not necessarily about someone literally being unable to function without you. It is about the emotional impact of your absence. It is about realizing that someone who was once part of your everyday emotional world is no longer there. And perhaps this person has been trying to act as though that does not bother them, but it does. It bothers them more than they want to admit. You may have noticed their stubbornness before. Perhaps they were the type of person who never apologized first, the type of person who always needed to be right, the type of person who would rather end a conversation than admit they were wrong, the type of person who could miss you and still wait for you to make the first move. They may have believed that showing vulnerability would put them at a disadvantage. They may have believed that if they admitted how much they cared, you would have power over them. And that may be why they kept denying their feelings. Because for this person, needing someone feels dangerous. They do not like feeling emotionally dependent. They do not like feeling as though another person can affect their mood. They do not like waking up and immediately thinking about someone. They do not like checking their phone hoping to see a message. They do not like wondering whether you are thinking about them. They do not like missing someone who is no longer available to them. And they especially do not like the fact that they cannot simply decide to stop caring because they may have tried. They may have literally told themselves, I am done. They may have deleted conversations. They may have avoided places where they might see you. They may have tried not to ask about you. They may have told friends that they were completely over it. They may have acted calm, unbothered, detached. But inside, there may have been a completely different story because every time something reminded them of you, they felt it. A song, a place, a certain time of day, a particular joke, a phrase you used to say, a memory that suddenly appeared without warning. And suddenly, they were back in that emotional space, thinking about you, remembering the way things felt, remembering what they had with you, and perhaps wondering whether they made a terrible mistake. This person may have underestimated your absence. They may have assumed that you would always be there. They may have believed that no matter what happened, you would eventually return. They may have thought that you would forgive them, that you would reach out, that you would continue waiting, that your feelings for them would remain exactly the same. But Virgo, you may have changed, and that may be the part that shocked them the most, because they may have expected to find you exactly where they left you, but you were not there anymore. You may have grown, you may have become quieter, more independent, more focused on yourself. You may have stopped chasing, stopped explaining, stopped trying to convince someone to understand your value. And perhaps the moment you stopped trying was the moment this person began to understand what they had been taking for granted. Because some people do not realize how much someone gives them until the giving stops. They do not realize how much attention they received until nobody is checking on them anymore. They do not realize how much emotional support they had until they are left alone with their own thought. They do not realize how much someone cared until that person stops asking how their day went. And this stubborn person may be experiencing that now. They may have been accustomed to your presence, your messages, your reactions, your emotional availability, your patience, your ability to understand what they meant even when they could not explain themselves properly. And perhaps they did not appreciate it enough when they had it. Now, they are comparing everything else to you, and nothing feels the same. They may talk to other people, but the conversations feel empty. They may meet new people, but they do not feel the same emotional connection. They may receive attention, but it does not affect them in the same way, because there is a difference between being entertained and being understood. There is a difference between being desired and being known. There is a difference between someone liking the idea of you and someone knowing the complicated parts of you and still choosing to stay. And perhaps you knew this person in a way that very few people did. You saw their good side, but you also saw their flaws, their moods, their fears, their insecurities, their contradictions, their defensive behavior, their stubbornness, their moments of weakness. And maybe you did not immediately run away from those things. Perhaps you understood them. Perhaps you gave them more patience than they deserved. Perhaps you tried to communicate. Perhaps you gave them opportunities to be honest. And perhaps they did not realize how rare that was. They may have assumed that everyone would understand them the way you did. But now they are discovering that most people do not have your patience. Most people do not notice the small details. Most people do not remember everything. Most people do not know when something is wrong simply by hearing the tone of someone's voice. Most people do not understand what someone means when they say, "I am fine," even though they clearly are not, but you did. You saw beneath the surface, and that may have made this person uncomfortable. Because being understood can feel wonderful, but it can also feel terrifying, especially for someone who has spent their life hiding behind pride. They may have been able to fool other people. They may have been able to pretend they did not care, but you saw through them. And perhaps that is why they pushed you away, not because they felt nothing, but because they felt too much and did not know what to do with it. This person may have wanted control. They may have wanted to control the pace of the relationship, the level of intimacy, the amount of vulnerability, the amount of communication. They may have wanted to decide when they came close and when they disappeared. And perhaps you eventually became tired of that. You may have realized that you could not continue participating in a connection where you were expected to wait for someone to decide whether you mattered. So you may have stepped back, and that changed everything. Because while they were comfortable with the idea of you always being available, they were not prepared for the possibility that you could actually leave. They may have believed that your love was permanent, but your presence was not. And now they are being forced to understand that difference. You can love someone and still walk away. You can care about someone and still refuse to chase them. You can miss someone and still choose your peace. You can remember the good times and still know that the relationship was not healthy for you. And perhaps this person never understood that about you. They may have thought that because you cared, you would always return. They may have thought that because you were patient, you would tolerate anything. They may have thought that because you were forgiving, there would never be consequences. But Virgo, your silence may have taught them something your words never could. You were serious. You were capable of leaving. And now they may be realizing that they cannot simply turn your feelings back on whenever they want. This person may have expected you to remain emotionally available while they remained emotionally confused. But you may have reached a point where you decided that confusion was no longer acceptable. You wanted clarity. You wanted consistency. You wanted effort. You wanted someone who could communicate instead of disappearing. You wanted someone who could admit when they were wrong. You wanted someone who could say, I miss you, without treating it like a weakness. And perhaps they were not capable of that before. But your absence may have forced them to confront themselves because when you were there, they could blame the situation. They could blame timing. They could blame misunderstandings. They could blame you. They could say that you were too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional, too difficult. But now that you are gone, they have no one else to blame. They are left alone with the memories. And perhaps those memories are beginning to reveal the truth. Maybe you were not asking for too much. Maybe you were asking the wrong person. Maybe your expectations were not unreasonable. Maybe you simply wanted something they were not emotionally mature enough to provide. And now they may be realizing that they may be replaying conversations in their mind, remembering moments when you tried to explain how you felt, remembering moments when you asked for reassurance, remembering moments when you wanted more consistency, and perhaps they dismissed you. They may have said things like, you are overthinking, or why are you making this such a big deal, or I do not have time for drama. But now they may be looking back and realizing that what they called drama was actually your attempt to communicate. What they called pressure may have been your attempt to create clarity. What they called neediness may have been your desire for consistency. And what they called your problem may have actually been a problem they did not want to face. that realization can be painful, especially for a stubborn person, because stubborn people do not like being wrong. They do not like realizing that the person they rejected was actually telling the truth. They do not like admitting that their behavior caused consequences. They do not like admitting that they lost someone valuable because of their own choices. But this person may be reaching that point now. And the hardest thing for them may be that they cannot undo the past. They cannot erase the things they said. They cannot erase the times they ignored you. They cannot erase the moments when you needed them and they were not there. They cannot erase the times they chose pride over communication. And perhaps they are realizing that you were giving them opportunities. You were waiting for them to meet you halfway, but they kept making you walk the entire distance until eventually you stopped. And when you stopped, they finally noticed how far apart you actually were. This person may have been comfortable with you doing all the emotional work. You may have been the one initiating conversations, trying to resolve conflict, checking in, making plans, offering reassurance, giving affection, and they may have responded when it was convenient. But now the silence is different because you are no longer doing the work for both of you. They are forced to experience what happens when you stop carrying the connection. And perhaps they cannot handle it. They may have thought that you were replaceable, but now they are discovering that the role you played in their life cannot simply be filled by another person. Because you were not just someone they spoke to, you may have become part of their emotional routine. And routines are difficult to break. They may have been used to telling you things, used to sharing their thoughts, used to hearing your opinion, used to receiving your reaction, used to knowing that there was someone who cared about the details of their life. Now, they may have something happen and instinctively think, I need to tell Virgo. And then they remember they cannot, or perhaps they can, but they are too afraid, too proud, too uncertain. They may type a message and delete it. They may look at your profile. They may wonder what you are doing. They may ask mutual acquaintances about you without making it obvious. They may pretend that they are simply curious, but curiosity is not always the real reason. Sometimes people ask about someone because they miss them. They simply do not want to admit it. This person may be watching you from a distance, and what they see may make things even harder because perhaps you look happy, you look peaceful, you look like you are moving forward. You may be focusing on yourself, working toward your goals, improving your life, spending time with people who appreciate you. And they may be wondering how you are able to continue without them. They may have expected you to fall apart. They may have expected you to chase them. They may have expected you to send a long emotional message. They may have expected you to prove that you still cared, but instead you became quiet. And your quietness may have been more powerful than anything you could have said, because now they do not know what you are thinking. They do not know whether you miss them. They do not know whether you have moved on. They do not know whether someone else has your attention. And uncertainty can be extremely uncomfortable for someone who likes control. They may be imagining possibilities. Maybe Virgo has met someone else. Maybe Virgo no longer cares. Maybe Virgo finally realized that I was not good enough. Maybe Virgo is happier without me. And perhaps the last possibility is the one that hurts them the most, because they may have believed that you needed them more than they needed you, but now they are beginning to question that belief. They may be realizing that you were the one who brought stability. You were the one who brought emotional depth. You were the one who made them feel seen. You were the one who knew how to calm them. You were the one who challenged them. You were the one who understood the parts of them that they never showed anyone else. And now that you are gone, they may be feeling the absence of all of it. This person may have been surrounded by people and still felt alone, because being surrounded by people does not mean being emotionally connected. You can be in a room full of people and still miss one specific person. You can receive attention from many people and still crave the attention of one person. You can be admired by others and still want the approval of someone who truly knows you. And perhaps you were that person for them. The one whose opinion mattered more than they wanted to admit. The one whose silence felt louder than everyone else's words. The one whose disappointment affected them. The one whose approval they secretly wanted. But instead of admitting that, they may have acted as though they did not care. That is the pattern of stubborn people. They often hide the things that matter most. They may care deeply but express it poorly. They may miss you but become distant. They may feel guilty but become defensive. They may want to apologize but wait for you to make the first move. And sometimes their pride becomes a prison. They are trapped inside their own refusal to admit the truth. But something may be changing. Perhaps they have reached the point where pride is no longer enough to protect them from the reality of your absence. They may have spent weeks or months telling themselves that they were fine. But now the truth is becoming impossible to ignore. They miss you. They miss your presence. They miss your energy. They miss the way you made ordinary moments feel meaningful. They miss the way you could make them laugh. They miss your reactions. They miss the way you remembered things they had forgotten telling you. They miss the comfort of knowing that someone understood them. And perhaps they are finally realizing that they cannot recreate what they had with you simply by meeting someone new, because connections are not interchangeable. Every person brings something different, and what you brought into their life may have been completely unique. You may have challenged them in ways others never did. You may have made them confront parts of themselves they preferred to ignore. You may have encouraged them, supported them, believed in them, and perhaps they did not fully appreciate that while you were doing it. Sometimes people become so accustomed to receiving support that they forget that support is a gift. They start treating it as an obligation. They expect it. They assume it will always be there. And then one day, the person who gave it stops. And suddenly, the difference becomes obvious. This person may now be recognizing how much you did. Not only the big things, the small things, the little messages, the reminders, the questions, the patience, the way you noticed when they were not themselves, the way you gave them chances, the way you listened even when you were tired. And perhaps they are asking themselves why they did not appreciate it more, why they let their ego get in the way, why they acted as though you were the problem. why they made you feel like caring about them was a weakness. This person may regret certain things. They may regret the last conversation, the last argument, the last time they ignored you, the last time you reached out and they did not respond properly. They may replay that moment, wondering what would have happened if they had responded differently. What if they had apologized? What if they had listened? What if they had chosen honesty instead of pride? What if they had simply told you that they loved you? These questions may be haunting them because they may realize that the ending did not have to happen the way it did. And perhaps the saddest part is that you may have tried to prevent it. You may have given them opportunities to change. You may have explained exactly what you needed. You may have told them how their behavior affected you, but they may have ignored the warning signs. They may have believed that you would never actually leave, and now they may be facing the consequences. This is why they may finally admit that they cannot live without you. Again, this does not necessarily mean that they are literally incapable of living their life. It means that emotionally, your absence has exposed how deeply connected they became to you. They may have thought they wanted freedom, but now that they have it, they may not enjoy it. They may have wanted distance, but now that you are distant, they may realize they did not actually want to lose you. They may have wanted control, but now they cannot control whether you return. And that may be terrifying for them because you are no longer waiting. You are no longer standing in the same place. You are no longer emotionally available on demand. And if they want you back in their life, they may have to approach you differently. They cannot simply return with the same attitude. They cannot expect you to forget everything. They cannot say, hey, and assume the entire past has disappeared. They may have to take responsibility. They may have to acknowledge what happened. They may have to admit that they were wrong. And for this person, that may be incredibly difficult. But perhaps they are finally preparing to do it. They may be thinking about what they would say. They may be imagining your reaction. They may be afraid that you will reject them. And that fear may be keeping them silent because the stubborn person who once believed that you would always be there may now be afraid that you no longer want them. And that is a very different position. Before, they may have assumed that you would forgive them. Now, they may be wondering whether you have already moved on emotionally. They may be afraid that they waited too long. They may be afraid that you have found someone who treats you better. They may be afraid that you are no longer impressed by them. They may be afraid that you will look at them and say, I do not want this anymore. And perhaps they know that you would have every right to say that. That is why they may be struggling. They want to reach out, but they do not know how. They want to apologize, but they do not know whether an apology will be enough. They want to tell you they miss you, but they do not want to appear weak. They want to tell you they need you, but they are afraid that you will use that information against them. And perhaps you would not, but they do not know that because they have always protected themselves with pride. And now pride is preventing them from receiving what they actually want. This person may be realizing that vulnerability is not the same as weakness. Admitting that they miss you does not make them weak. Admitting that they made a mistake does not make them weak. Admitting that they need someone emotionally does not make them weak. But they may have been raised to believe that needing someone is dangerous. Perhaps they learned early in life that showing feelings could be used against them. Perhaps they learned to hide emotions, to remain strong, to never ask for help, to never admit that they were hurt. And now they may be carrying those habits into their relationships. When they feel vulnerable, they withdraw. When they miss someone, they become cold. When they are hurt, they become angry. When they are afraid of losing someone, they act as though they do not care. But you may have seen through all of that, and perhaps that is why this connection affected them so deeply. You did not simply accept the mask, you noticed the person underneath it, and being seen can be addictive, especially when someone has spent their life hiding. They may have felt safe with you, even if they did not know how to say it, even if they sometimes pushed you away, even if they acted as though they did not need you. There may have been a part of them that felt comfortable knowing you were there. And now that you are not, they are discovering how much comfort your presence provided. You may have been their emotional home, not because you were responsible for their happiness, but because they could be themselves around you. And perhaps they are now realizing that they have not found that feeling anywhere else. They can meet new people, they can have new conversations, they can laugh, they can socialize, but something is missing. The depth, the familiarity, the history, the understanding, the feeling of not having to explain every part of themselves. And that may be what they miss most. They miss being known. They miss being understood without having to give a long explanation. They miss the person who could look at them and immediately know when something was wrong. And Virgo, that may have been you. You may have known them better than they wanted you to, and now they are realizing that losing you also meant losing someone who understood them. That is not easy to replace. This person may have tried to convince themselves that what you had was ordinary. They may have told themselves that they could find it again, but time may have proven otherwise. They may have met people who were attractive, people who were interesting, people who were kind, but the emotional connection may not have been the same. And perhaps that is when the truth began to hit them. They did not simply miss having a relationship, they missed you specifically. Your personality, your humor, your mind, your habits, your way of seeing things, the unique combination of qualities that made you who you are. And once someone realizes they miss the person rather than simply missing companionship, that realization can be painful because you cannot replace one person with another. You can move forward. You can meet new people. You can build new connections, but you cannot recreate the exact history you had with someone else. And perhaps this person is finally accepting that. They may be realizing that the connection with you was not something they could simply discard and replace. They may be realizing that they had something rare and they may have damaged it because they were too stubborn to admit how much it mattered. This is where regret may enter. They may regret not telling you more. They may regret not showing you enough. They may regret assuming that you would always be there. They may regret letting their pride make decisions for them. And perhaps they are now thinking about all the things they wish they had said. I miss you. I was wrong. I should have treated you better. I did care. I never stopped thinking about you. I did not know how much you meant to me until you were gone. But thinking these things and saying them are very different. And this person may still be struggling to cross that distance. They may write the message, read it, delete it, write another one, delete that too. They may look at your name on their phone, then put the phone down. They may tell themselves that tomorrow will be the day, and then another day passes. This can continue until the emotional pressure becomes greater than their fear of rejection, and perhaps that is where they are now. At the point where silence is becoming more painful than vulnerability, they may finally realize that if they do nothing, they may lose you permanently. And that possibility may be unbearable because they may have believed that time was on their side. But time has been changing you. You have been moving forward, and the longer they wait, the more difficult it may become to return. You may have healed. You may have accepted the ending. You may have stopped hoping, and perhaps they can feel that. They may sense that you are no longer emotionally waiting for them. And that may be the reason they are suddenly feeling an urgency they did not feel before. They may realize that you are not frozen in time. You are not sitting around waiting for them to decide what they want. Your life continues, and perhaps someone else may eventually notice the value they failed to appreciate. That thought may bother them, not because they own you, they do not, but because they may finally understand that they had an opportunity and did not protect it. They may realize that someone else could give you the consistency they refused to give. Someone else could appreciate your attention. Someone else could communicate with you. Someone else could make you feel safe. And perhaps they are afraid that you will discover that you never needed them as much as they needed you. That fear can be extremely humbling because they may have spent so long believing that they had the power. They may have thought you were the one who cared more. They may have thought you would always return. And now they may be questioning everything. Maybe Virgo was stronger than I realized. Maybe Virgo was more independent than I realized. Maybe Virgo actually can move on. Maybe I am the one who cannot. And that realization may be destroying their pride. But it may also be teaching them something. Sometimes losing someone is the only way a person learns to appreciate what they had. Sometimes distance creates clarity. Sometimes silence reveals the truth. Sometimes the absence of a person becomes louder than their presence ever was. And perhaps your absence has become impossible for this person to ignore. They may be finally admitting to themselves that they cannot go back to the way things were before they met you, because knowing you changed something in them. Even if the relationship ended, even if you are no longer together, even if you never speak again, some connections leave an imprint, and perhaps you left one on this person. They may not be able to erase the memories. They may not be able to pretend that you meant nothing. They may not be able to convince themselves that they are completely unaffected because the truth keeps returning. They miss you. They care about you. They regret losing you, and perhaps they are finally ready to admit it. But Virgo, this is where you must be careful. Someone admitting that they cannot live without you does not automatically mean they are ready to love you correctly. Missing you is not the same as changing. Regretting losing you is not the same as becoming capable of giving you what you need. Wanting you back is not the same as knowing how to build a healthy relationship. And you must remember that. Because this person may genuinely miss you. They may genuinely care. They may genuinely regret their behavior. But the real question is whether they are willing to do something different. Are they willing to communicate? Are they willing to be consistent? Are they willing to take responsibility? Are they willing to respect your boundaries? Are they willing to stop using pride as an excuse? Because you do not need someone who simply cannot live without you. You need someone who knows how to live beside you without making you feel alone. That is the difference. You do not need someone who panics when you leave. You need someone who appreciates you while you are there. You do not need someone who regrets losing you. You need someone who makes an effort not to lose you in the first place. And perhaps this person is learning that now. Maybe your absence has forced them to understand the value of consistency. Maybe they are finally recognizing that love cannot survive on feelings alone. You can love someone and still lose them. You can care about someone and still hurt them. You can miss someone and still fail to give them what they need. Love requires action. And perhaps this stubborn person is finally realizing that they may be reaching a point where they understand that if they want you back, they cannot simply say, I miss you. They have to show you, they have to prove that the relationship would be different. They have to understand that you are not going to forget everything simply because they finally decided to be honest. And perhaps they know that that may be why they are nervous. They may be preparing themselves for a difficult conversation, a conversation where they finally admit the truth. They may tell you that they tried to move on. They may tell you that they thought they could forget you. They may tell you that they were wrong. They may tell you that they miss you more than they expected. They may tell you that they never thought they would become this attached. And perhaps they will finally say the words they have been avoiding. I cannot imagine my life without you. But, Virgo, listen carefully to what comes after those words. The emotion is important. The confession may be meaningful, but the behavior afterward will tell you everything. Do they become consistent? Do they communicate? Do they respect your needs? Do they stop disappearing? Do they stop expecting you to do all the emotional work? Do they finally meet you halfway? That is what matters, because you deserve more than a dramatic confession. You deserve a stable reality. You deserve someone who does not need to lose you before realizing your value. You deserve someone who does not make you question whether you matter. And if this person truly has changed, they will understand that. They will not demand immediate forgiveness. They will not pressure you to forget. They will not become angry if you need time. They will understand that their actions created the distance, and they will accept the responsibility of rebuilding trust. That is how you will know whether their confession is genuine, not by the intensity of their words, by the patience of their actions. A person who truly understands that they almost lost you will not rush you. They will not force you to return to the same level of intimacy immediately. They will understand that you are different now, and they will have to earn access to the new version of you, because the version of you they lost may no longer exist. You may have grown beyond the person who tolerated their stubbornness. You may have become more protective of yourself, more aware of your needs, more willing to walk away. And if they want to be in your life now, they will have to meet the person you have become, not expect you to return to who you were. This is the lesson this person may be learning. You were never asking them to be perfect. You were asking them to be present, to be honest, to communicate, to care about the effect their actions had on you. And perhaps they are finally understanding that maybe they thought love was about intense feelings, but you needed emotional responsibility. Maybe they thought chemistry was enough, but you needed consistency. Maybe they thought you would always forgive them, but you needed accountability. And perhaps now they understand. They may be thinking about the ways you tried to love them, the ways you showed up, the ways you were patient, and perhaps they are finally admitting that they did not give you enough in return. That realization may be painful, but it can also be the beginning of growth. People can change when they are finally forced to confront the consequences of their choices. And perhaps this person is standing at that moment now. They can continue pretending. They can continue acting stubborn. They can continue telling themselves that they do not need you. Or they can finally be honest. They can admit that they miss you. They can admit that they made mistakes. They can admit that you mattered. They can admit that losing you affected them. And perhaps they are finally ready to do that. Not because they are weak, because they are tired of lying to themselves. They are tired of pretending. They are tired of acting as though nothing happened. They are tired of carrying the weight of their own pride. And perhaps the truth is becoming easier than the lie. The truth is, they miss you. They care. They regret what happened. They have not been able to replace what they had with you. And they may finally be ready to say it. But Virgo, remember this. You do not have to rush toward them simply because they finally understand. You do not have to forgive immediately. You do not have to return to the past. You do not have to prove that you still care by giving them immediate access to you. You can listen. You can observe. You can decide. And you can choose what is best for you. Maybe the relationship can be repaired. Maybe it cannot. Maybe the person has truly changed. Maybe they have only become lonely. Time will reveal the difference. You do not need to figure everything out in one conversation. You do not need to make a decision under emotional pressure. You have the right to take your time because this time you are not going to allow someone else's desperation to become your responsibility. If they truly want you in their life, they can demonstrate that consistently. They can show you, they can be patient, they can respect your decision, and if they are truly different, they will understand. The person who only wants access will become frustrated when you do not immediately return. The person who genuinely values you will continue showing up respectfully. That will tell you everything. And perhaps this person is finally becoming capable of the second option. Perhaps losing you forced them to mature. Perhaps your absence forced them to confront their emotional patterns. Perhaps they finally realized that stubbornness is not strength when it costs you the people you love. Perhaps they finally realized that silence is not always power. Sometimes silence is simply avoidance. Perhaps they finally realized that refusing to apologize does not make you strong. It simply leaves you alone with your pride. And perhaps they no longer want to be alone with it. They may be ready to put their pride down. They may be ready to say, I was wrong. I miss you. I should have done better. I did not understand what I had. I thought I could move on, but I could not. And perhaps you have been waiting a long time to hear something like that. But Virgo, do not let the confession erase your wisdom. You have learned too much. You have grown too much. You have become too aware of your value to return to the same patterns without evidence of change. If they come back, let them come back differently. Let them communicate differently. Let them show up differently. Let them handle conflict differently. Let them love you differently. Because you are no longer interested in repeating the same story and expecting a different ending. You may still love them. You may still care. You may still have feelings, but your feelings do not have to control your decisions. You can love someone and still require better treatment. You can forgive someone and still have boundaries. You can give someone another chance and still make them earn your trust. You can be open to reconciliation without abandoning your standards. And perhaps this is exactly what this person needs to understand. They cannot return to the version of you who accepted less. That version of you is gone. You have become more conscious, more selective, more protective of your peace. And perhaps that is why they are finally taking you seriously. Before, they may have assumed you would always be available. Now, they know better. They know that you can walk away. They know that you can rebuild your life. They know that you can continue without them. And that realization may be what finally breaks through their stubbornness, because they may finally understand that the choice is no longer entirely theirs. You have a choice too, and perhaps that is what makes them nervous. They may want you back, but they do not know whether you will want them. They may miss you, but they do not know whether you miss them in the same way. They may regret losing you, but they do not know whether you have already accepted the loss. And perhaps they are finally experiencing the uncertainty that they once made you experience. The uncertainty of not knowing where you stand, the uncertainty of wondering what someone is thinking, the uncertainty of waiting for communication. And perhaps now they understand how painful that can be. Maybe that is the lesson. Not revenge, not punishment. Understanding. Sometimes a person does not understand what they put you through until they experience something similar. And perhaps this person is finally experiencing your absence. They are feeling the silence, the distance, the unanswered questions, the loss of access. And it may be teaching them what your words could not. You are not asking for too much. You are asking to feel valued. And perhaps they now understand that. They may finally realize that your love was not guaranteed. Your patience was not unlimited. Your presence was not permanent. And your heart was not a place they could enter and leave without consequences. That realization may hurt, but it may also create genuine respect. They may finally understand that if they want you in their life, they need to treat your presence as something valuable, not something automatic, not something guaranteed, something they are grateful for. And perhaps that is the transformation happening inside this stubborn person. They are finally becoming aware of their feelings, aware of their mistakes, aware of your value, aware of the consequences of their behavior. And perhaps they are ready to stop running from the truth. The truth is that they miss you. The truth is that they care. The truth is that they have not found an easy replacement. The truth is that your absence has affected them. The truth is that they may have been pretending to be stronger than they really are. And the truth is that perhaps they cannot continue pretending forever. Eventually, the heart becomes tired of being ignored. Eventually, the mind becomes tired of making excuses. Eventually, pride becomes too heavy to carry. And perhaps this person has reached that point. They may finally be ready to put down the pride. They may finally be ready to speak. They may finally be ready to admit what they have been hiding. And Virgo, when they do, listen carefully, not only to what they say, listen to how they say it. Listen to whether they take responsibility. Listen to whether they acknowledge your experience. Listen to whether they understand why you walked away. Listen to whether they are asking for access or offering accountability. There is a difference. Someone who says, "I miss you, come back," may simply miss your presence. Someone who says, "I understand why you left, I know what I did, and I am willing to change how I show up," is offering something much more meaningful. And perhaps this person is learning how to say the second thing. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not immediately, but perhaps they are finally learning. And if they are, you will see it. You will feel the difference. Because genuine change is not loud, it is consistent. It appears in small moments, in the way someone responds when they are frustrated, in the way they handle your boundaries, in the way they communicate when things are difficult, in the way they stop making excuses, in the way they become more intentional. That is what you should watch. Not only the dramatic confession, the everyday behavior, because anyone can say, "I cannot live without you." But the person who truly values you will learn how to live with you in a way that does not make you wish you were alone. And that is what you deserve. You deserve someone who does not need to lose you to recognize you. Someone who does not need to experience your absence to appreciate your presence. Someone who does not need to become desperate before becoming honest. But if this person is genuinely growing, perhaps they can become that person. Perhaps this experience has changed them. Perhaps losing you forced them to look at themselves. Perhaps they are finally ready to do the emotional work they avoided before. And perhaps, Virgo, that is why the energy around this situation feels so intense. Because something has shifted, you are no longer the same. They are no longer as certain. The balance has changed. The person who once believed they had control may now realize that they do not. The person who once assumed you would wait may now be afraid that you will not. The person who once believed they could walk away may now be the one standing at the door, wondering whether they are allowed back in. And that is a powerful reversal. But remember, you are not responsible for making them feel better about the consequences of their choices. You are not responsible for saving them from regret. You are not responsible for making their return easy. If they want to return, they can approach you with honesty. If they want forgiveness, they can demonstrate accountability. If they want another chance, they can show that they understand why the first chance was lost. And you can decide that is your power. You are no longer waiting for them to choose you. You are deciding whether they still belong in your life. And perhaps they are finally realizing that maybe they are looking at you differently now. Not as someone who will always be there, but as someone they could genuinely lose. And perhaps that realization is what has finally broken their stubbornness. They may finally understand that you were never asking them to be perfect. You are asking them to care enough to try. You are asking them to meet you halfway. You are asking them to stop making you feel alone inside a connection. And perhaps they finally understand that. They may look back and realize that you are not asking for the impossible. You are asking for basic emotional presence. And perhaps they failed to give it. Now, they may be ready to make a different choice, but the decision is no longer only about whether they want you. It is about whether they can give you the kind of relationship you deserve. That is the question. And you do not need to answer it today. You can take your time, you can observe, you can listen, you can protect yourself, you can remain open without becoming naive. You can have compassion without abandoning your standards. You can recognize their pain without taking responsibility for it. And perhaps that is the healthiest place for you to stand, because you have already learned what happens when you give someone everything while receiving uncertainty in return. You are not going back there. You are not going to become the person who waits endlessly for someone to decide. You are not going to beg someone to appreciate you. You are not going to prove your value. You are not going to chase someone who knows exactly where to find you. If this stubborn person truly cannot imagine life without you, they know what they need to do. They need to stop hiding. They need to stop pretending. They need to stop waiting for you to do everything. They need to be honest. And perhaps they are finally ready. Maybe one day the message comes. Maybe the conversation happens. Maybe they finally say the words they have been avoiding. I miss you. I was wrong. I did not know how much you meant to me. I tried to move on. I could not. I do not want to lose you. And perhaps hearing that will affect you. Of course it might. You are human. You may still have feelings. You may still remember the good moments. But remember the entire story, not only the beautiful parts. Remember why you stepped away. Remember what you learned. Remember how you felt when you were not being valued. And then ask yourself whether the person standing in front of you now is truly different. Not whether they miss you, not whether they want you, not whether they are afraid of losing you, whether they are capable of loving you in a way that allows you to feel secure. That is what matters. Because you are not looking for someone who cannot live without you. You are looking for someone who can live a complete life and still intentionally choose you. Someone who does not need you for survival, but who values you deeply. Someone who does not cling to you because they are afraid of being alone, but who remains because they genuinely appreciate who you are. That is the kind of connection you deserve. And perhaps after all of this, this person is finally beginning to understand that they may have mistaken your patience for weakness, your love for dependence, your forgiveness for permission, your presence for permanence. But now they know better. You can love someone and still leave. You can forgive someone and still move on. You can miss someone and still choose yourself. And perhaps they are finally realizing that you were never as dependent on them as they believed. Maybe they were the one who became dependent on your presence. Maybe they were the one who needed your understanding. Maybe they were the one who relied on your emotional availability. Maybe they were the one who did not know how to continue once you stopped giving. And that realization may be humbling, but it may also be honest. This stubborn person may finally admit that you were more important than they wanted to acknowledge. They may finally admit that they did not want to lose you. They may finally admit that their pride cost them something precious. And perhaps, Virgo, This is the moment where the truth finally becomes impossible to hide. They can continue pretending, or they can finally be honest. They can continue carrying their pride, or they can finally put it down. They can continue living with the absence, or they can finally reach out. And whatever happens next, remember this: you are not the same person they lost. You have grown. You have learned. You have become stronger. And if they want access to you again, they will need to meet the person you are now, not the person you were when you were willing to wait endlessly, not the person who accepted confusion, not the person who kept explaining your pain. You are different now. You know your value. You know what you need. You know what you will no longer tolerate. And perhaps that is exactly why this person is finally ready to admit the truth, because your absence forced them to see what your presence allowed them to ignore. They cannot pretend forever. They cannot replace every connection. They cannot erase every memory. They cannot convince themselves that you meant nothing. And perhaps they are finally ready to say what their pride prevented them from saying before. They miss you. They need your presence in their life. They regret losing you. And perhaps they are finally ready to admit that they cannot imagine life without you. But Virgo, remember something important. The goal is not to make someone desperate for you. The goal is not to make someone suffer without you. The goal is not to prove that they need you more than you need them. The real goal is mutual choice, mutual respect, mutual effort, mutual honesty. You should not have to disappear for someone to value you. You should not have to leave for someone to communicate. You should not have to break their heart before they finally realize that you have one too. And if this person truly understands that now, then perhaps something different can be built, something more mature, more honest, more balanced. But if they only return because they are lonely, because they miss the comfort, because they cannot stand the idea of you moving on, then be careful. You are not someone's emotional emergency. You are not someone's backup plan. You are not someone they can return to whenever they become bored with the alternatives. You deserve consistency. And perhaps this person is finally ready to offer it. Only time will show. But for now, know this: your absence has been felt. The silence has been noticed. The distance has changed something. And the person who once acted as though they could live perfectly without you may finally be realizing that they were only pretending. They may have tried to be strong. They may have tried to be stubborn. They may have tried to convince themselves that they did not care. But the truth keeps returning. They miss the way you understood them. They miss the way you made them feel. They miss the connection. They miss the familiarity. They miss your presence. And perhaps they are finally tired of pretending otherwise. The stubborn person may finally admit that they were wrong. They may finally admit that they cannot simply erase you. They may finally admit that you mattered more than their pride allowed them to say. And perhaps, Virgo, they are finally ready to stop running from the truth, because you were never just another person. You became part of their emotional world. And when you left, something went with you, something they may not have realized they depended on: your attention, your understanding, your warmth, your presence, your ability to see them. And perhaps now they understand the value of what they lost. The question is not whether they miss you. They probably do. The question is whether they are ready to become the person who can keep you. That is the real test, because you are no longer interested in being loved only after someone realizes they cannot live without you. You want to be loved while you are present, appreciated while you are giving, respected while you are available. And if this person has truly learned their lesson, they will understand that. They will not wait until you disappear again. They will not make you question their feelings. They will not force you to walk away just to prove that you can. They will finally understand that your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. And perhaps, Virgo, that is the lesson this stubborn person is finally learning. They thought they could live without you. They thought they could move on. They thought they could replace you. They thought they were stronger than their feeling. But now they are beginning to understand something completely different. You were never the person they could simply forget. You were never the connection they could easily recreate. You were never as replaceable as they assumed. And perhaps, finally, after all this time, they are ready to admit it. They cannot live without the impact you had on them. They cannot erase the memories. They cannot pretend the connection meant nothing. And perhaps they cannot continue pretending that they do not want you back in their life. So, Virgo, let them face the truth. Let them confront their pride. Let them decide whether they are willing to become honest. You do not have to chase them. You do not have to convince them. You do not have to remind them of what they lost. They know, and perhaps now they know more clearly than ever. The person who once acted like they did not need you may finally be the one realizing how much your absence has affected them. The person who once waited for you to reach out may finally be the one considering making the first move. The person who once refused to admit their feelings may finally be preparing to say the words, I miss you. I was wrong. I need you in my life. And perhaps, for the first time, they will not be saying it because they want control. They will be saying it because they have finally accepted the truth. You mattered. You still matter. And losing you changed them. Now, the next chapter is not about whether they can convince you to return. It is about whether they can show you that they are finally capable of meeting you where you have always been, with honesty, with consistency, with respect, with effort, and with enough humility to admit that sometimes the person you thought you could live without becomes the person you realize you never should have taken for granted. And Virgo, perhaps this stubborn person is finally learning exactly that.